Good evening, everyone. My name is Caroline Berryman, Program Manager, Departmental Communications in Public Works at York Region. I will be your host for tonight's meeting on the Draft Transportation Master Plan, which you will hear us referring to as the TMP. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the residents and business owners who've joined us here tonight. Thank you for being here. We acknowledge York Region is located on the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples, such as the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Métis peoples, and the treaty territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Williams Treaties First Nations, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. York Region falls under the Nan-Fan Treaty with the Haudenosaunee, Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Williams Treaties with the Chippewas of Beausoleil, Georgina Island, and Rama First Nations, and the Mississaugas of Alderville, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, and Scugog Island First Nations. There are also other land claims and treaty rights involving portions of York Region that have not been resolved. The Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation is the closest First Nation community to York Region. We thank these and other Indigenous peoples for sharing their land with us. We look forward to hearing from you tonight. Before we get started, let's go over some engagement guidelines to ensure a smooth and effective meeting. Because we have such a large turnout and for stability of the platform, we've turned off cameras and sound and the raise your hand option for a more effective interaction. We want this to be a relaxed and interactive space for everyone. For the question and answer portion of tonight's meeting, please interact with us through the Q&A chat box. For those who haven't used it before, the Q&A button is located at the bottom of your screen, right beside the chat button. The TMP project team will be monitoring the Q&As and responding accordingly. We may not be able to address all the comments and questions we received tonight. However, we are committed to taking all questions back and providing responses through an FAQ on our webpage at york.ca/TMP. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat function and help will be provided. This session will be recorded so we can go back and review the comments and discussion. After tonight, the presentation will be available online within a few days, and your feedback, which will not be attributed to any specific person, will be uploaded by category for viewing. Comments can also be submitted after tonight's session by going to york.ca/TMP. We have enabled auto transcription for this meeting. While this system generally does a good job of capturing what is being said, there may be errors in the written text. If anyone needs clarification for anything being said, please feel free to reach out to us by submitting a comment using the Q&A chat box, and we will be happy to clarify. We invite comments. However, we reserve the right to remove anything that may not be appropriate for this session. This is the third and final Public Information Center, and tonight we will have a presentation on the draft 2022 TMP, followed by a video on what we've heard and how we've used the information received to inform the TMP update, followed by a question and answer session where you will have an opportunity to ask questions, and finally, next steps for the TMP. I would now like to introduce Brian Titherington, Director, Transportation Infrastructure Planning. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Caroline, and welcome to our third Transportation Master Plan Open House. The draft TMP is based on technical analysis, which has been informed by Regional Council priorities and the feedback received through public engagement process to date. This process has been iterative, with the TMP being updated to reflect consideration of stakeholder input received. The purpose of this Public Information Center is to bring us together, to share the findings in our draft Transportation Master Plan, which is a long-term planning study that includes recommended transportation networks in key focus areas. To hear from you as to whether the plan reflects the information and feedback we have shared to date. To give you an opportunity to ask our panel any remaining questions about the draft as we move towards finalizing the master plan. Some of you may be aware that we're also underway on consultation for York Region Transit's 2023 annual service plan. This consultation focuses on changes to routes, services, facilities, and programs. We would encourage those interested in participating in the YRT 2023 annual plan to get more information at yrt.ca/transit plan. Just a reminder that tonight's session will focus on the TMP, which is a high-level overview of proposed infrastructure and programs to address the region's transportation needs over the next 30 years. Before we move further into the presentation, I'd like to introduce the transportation and communications teams behind the Transportation Master Plan update. The efforts to date have been led internally by our team of experts in roads, active transportation, transit, planning, data forecasting, and communications. A big thank you to everyone involved. I would also note that many of our staff are also York Region residents, including myself and our project manager, Lauren. So through this update, we've not only applied our professional knowledge, but also our personal York Region travel experiences. With that, thank you again for giving us your time this evening. And now I'd like to turn things over to Carrie Hyde, Program Manager of Transportation Planning and Research, to walk us through the presentation. Carrie?
Thank you, Brian. The Transportation Master Plan provides a long-term vision for transportation in York Region, including transportation network maps that identify the recommended cycling, roads, and rapid transit needs to support planned growth over the next 30 years to the year 2051, and focus areas where further study is required to address key transportation issues following the completion of the master plan. The network maps and focus areas being presented today are drafts and represent the improvements that regional staff feel meet the transportation needs of the community based on realistic future funding assumptions. As such, the maps and focus areas are subject to change based on input received until April 29th, which is the last day we will be accepting comments for consideration as we move towards finalizing the TMP. Please note that the TMP will not be providing details about specific projects that should be built. Rather, the timing of projects will be determined through the region's 10-year capital program, which is approved each year by council. The project to update the TMP is being coordinated with other regional studies through the Municipal Comprehensive Review process to ensure the outcomes align with the updates to the Regional Official Plan, Water and Wastewater Master Plan, and Development Charges Bylaw. Since our last Public Information Center in October, a draft TMP was developed and brought to Council for review and consideration in March 2022. This report has been available for public review on the york.ca website since then. We are following a three-phase process to update the TMP. Throughout each phase of the TMP study, staff have engaged with the public and stakeholders to seek input and share ideas on the future of transportation in York Region. We've completed both the Discover phase, which focused on developing the foundations for the TMP, including the purpose statement, guiding principles and objectives, and the Explore phase, which was about looking at transportation network alternatives and identifying the preferred network to 2051, as well as completing background studies and developing focus areas. We are now in the final phase of the TMP study, where we have brought together the strategic planning work, recommended 2051 transportation networks, and focus areas into a draft plan that we are looking to finalize in June of this year. Since we initiated the TMP, we have reached out to various groups, including residents, regional council, local municipal councils and staff, First Nations and Indigenous communities, stakeholders, and community organizations. We've used a variety of engagement methods to reach as wide an audience as possible, including virtual public information centers, such as the one tonight, surveys, and social media polls, as well as through information sharing about the project through a range of methods from print to digital to social media. I'm now going to share an overview of what we've heard throughout the study and how we've used the information received to date to inform the TMP. At our last Public Information Center in the fall, we shared an overview of the key themes we heard through the Discover phase of the study. As such, I'm only going to provide a high-level summary of this slide. However, if anyone would like more detail, our presentation from October's Public Information Center is available on the project website. These key themes summarize what we heard from over 1,000 respondents across the region about what's most important for making travel decisions and the desired future for transportation. As you can see, Many of these themes relate to enhancing access to a variety of travel options that provide connections that are safe, reliable, convenient, and environmentally sustainable. The feedback we gathered helped us develop and validate the purpose statement, our vision for transportation, the guiding principles, objectives, focus areas, and initiatives for the TMP. The graphic on the left side illustrates how the TMP shapes decision-making and serves as a roadmap for transportation planning, and shows the relationship between the purpose statement, guiding principles, objectives, focus areas, and initiatives. It is important to note that the TMP is a long-term plan that recommends the infrastructure needs to support growth to 2051, as well as the nearer-term focus areas and initiatives. This slide is intended to show the guiding principles that represent York Region's values for transportation and provide guidance and direction for making transportation decisions, as well as the objectives, which outline the goals from the TMP and lay the foundation for the focus areas that represent transportation priorities for further study and consultation over the next term of council, and the initiatives that represent the work to support the objectives and guiding principles. Building on what we heard through the Discover phase, in the Explore phase of the project, we gathered feedback and input on our proposed 2051 transportation networks and focus areas, and heard that it's important to have a number of viable travel options that meet the needs of all users, including transit, cycling, walking, and driving. We also heard a desire for increasing transit and active transportation networks, understanding that the region is diverse and different travelers and communities have unique needs. One size truly does not fit all. Safety for all, especially vulnerable road users, was another key theme, with an emphasis on all roads for all modes and balancing safety and mobility for individual road users as well as goods movement. We heard about the importance of meeting the needs of current and future residents and doing so in a way that is affordable today and for future generations. Consideration for the environment and sustainability was also, again, at the forefront. The TMP aligns with the region's fiscal strategy, with cost estimates of approximately $12.5 billion for transit, $6.8 billion for roads, and $500 million for active transportation projects. The TMP provides an estimate of all costs, not just the cost to York Region, as contributions are expected from other levels of government. The region's share of costs is based on current spend over the next decade through the 10-year Roads and Transit Capital Program. The TMP informs the 2022 Development Charges Bylaw, which will help to fund new growth projects. Additional projects would be funded through property taxes, grants, subsidies, and cost-sharing opportunities with third parties. We would now like to share a video highlighting some of our recommendations for the transportation networks and focus areas based on technical assessments, council direction, financial considerations, and what we heard from you through the Explore phase. After the video, I will pass things over to Lauren Crawford to moderate our question and answer session.
Today, we would like to share the themes that came out of our engagement sessions and how they have been applied to the 2022 Transportation Master Plan update. Theme 1, Safety for All. Comments supporting safety for all travelers resulted in recommendations for future improvements, like locating cycling lanes off-road to keep cyclists separate from vehicle traffic. Theme 2, Enhance active transportation. Walking and cycling are growing trends, and we are looking to complete major regional cycling facilities, including the Lake-to-Lake route stretching from Lake Simcoe in the north to Lake Ontario in the south, and initiate the South York Greenway Cycling, Pedestrian, and Micromobility Corridor, which will connect with trails in the southern 3 municipalities, as well as to trails in Toronto and Peel region. Theme 3, Increased transit. The increasing interest in taking transit is reflected in initiatives like the expansion of bus rapid transit and the Yonge subway line. Theme 4, Provide travel options. We have recommended infrastructure for the next 30 years through our transportation network maps, which include different modes of travel such as subways, bus rapid transit, cycling, walking, and driving. Theme 5, Meet the needs of current and future travelers. We have a plan focusing on maximizing benefits to travelers and connecting communities while recognizing the region's financial realities, both today and into the future. Theme 6, Protect the environment. Environmental responsibility and supporting the region's goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2051 will be supported by shifting corporate and transit fleets to electric, protecting the environment by providing wildlife crossings, and enhancing streetscaping with tree plantings. We thank everyone who took the time to share their thoughts and feedback. While we are in the final phase of the engagement process, you can still visit york.ca/TMP to provide feedback on the draft TMP, view the interactive mapping tool, and like the pins you support until Friday, April 29th, 2022.
Thanks, Carrie. That was a great overview of our TMP study and the highlights of the draft plan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Crawford. I'm the Manager of Transportation Long-Term Planning at York Region, and I have the pleasure of being the panel moderator for tonight's question and answer session. So we have a panel of experts that will be joining us tonight, and they are York Region Public Works employees. Brian Titherington, who you met earlier this evening, is joining us again for the Q&A. And we also have Diana Kakamusias, Program Manager of Sustainable Mobility, who will assist us with questions related to active transportation, such as walking, hiking, cycling, e-bikes, and e-scooters. Erin Strawn is also joining us this evening. She's York Region's Transit Policy and Accessible Service Specialist, and she's going to help respond to questions about transit. And we also have Mark Hanlon joining us, Senior Transportation Specialist. He will be assisting with questions about the regional road network. So welcome to panelists, and thank you very much for being here with us this evening. So before we get started, I just want to run through a few things. As mentioned at the beginning of tonight's session, please do share your questions through the Q&A chat box, which is located at the bottom of your screen, right beside the chat button. I have been keeping an eye on the Q&A throughout the presentation, and I've seen quite a few questions come through already, so thank you very much. We will plan to spend about 20 minutes this evening taking questions, and we'll try to get through as many of those as possible. We do also have a team of staff that are working behind the scenes with us this evening to help provide responses to the questions that we aren't able to get to through the panel. And although we may not be able to address all the comments and questions we received tonight, we are committed to taking all questions back and providing responses through our FAQs on our webpage at york.ca/TMP, and we'll get those up within a few days of tonight's session. As Brian mentioned up front, there is another transportation consultation session happening for York Region Transit's annual service planning. So if you have any transit-related questions or feedback regarding current services or short-term plans, York Region Transit welcomes your input. However, tonight we are here to talk about the TMP, which, as Carrie has outlined, takes a longer-term 30-year outlook that's much broader in scope, looking at all of the region's transportation networks, whether it be active transportation, transit, or roads. And we'll continue to engage with the public and our partners and stakeholders on individual and specific projects and services and plans as those projects come about. So with that, I will start taking some questions. I do apologize. I'm working with dual screens here, so I may be looking away from the camera just to grab some of these questions that are coming through. I did see one from earlier this evening about active transportation. So I'm going to turn that one over to Diana to help us answer. Diana, the question was, are there any specific plans for dedicated bike lanes that are separate from the road?
Yeah, absolutely, Lauren, and that's a really great question. Thank you. Certainly, from our regional perspective and as part of our transportation master plan update, we're really focusing on all roads for all modes. So that is including active transportation and moving to an off-street cycling facility approach whenever possible. So we do often leverage our pedestrian and cycling planning and design guidelines, which offer a context-sensitive approach to recommend cycling facilities for our regional boulevards. So that is certainly something that we are looking to in the future to implement whenever possible, cycling facilities off-street.
Thanks, Carrie, appreciate that. I do see another one here. This one actually, there was another one about cycling, but it seems to be very similar about dedicated bike lanes separate from the road. There's another one here on transit. So I'm going to turn to Erin Strawn to help us with this question. So the question is, Erin, are there any plans for York Region to further integrate transit services with neighboring cities and regions?
Thank you for that question. Currently, York Region Transit has fare and service integration with multiple transit agencies, including accepting transfers between York Region Transit, Brampton Transit, and Durham Region Transit. In addition, we also offer free co-fare when transferring to and from GO Transit. And we operate cross-boundary services connecting travelers with the TTC subway stations in Toronto, and we continue to work with the TTC and various levels of government to address cross-boundary double fares between the two systems. Actually, we continue to work with all of our neighboring transit agencies across the GTHA as we develop fare and service integration initiatives. And these initiatives may include routes crossing between boundaries, connecting to higher levels of transit, and fare payment solutions. So this is definitely ongoing work.
Great, thank you so much, Erin, appreciate that. So I see a question here. Is there any, this is a road question, so I'll turn to Mark to see if he can help us with this one. Is there any consideration of building fewer roads and making better use of roads that you have in light of climate change and the impacts of salt?
That's a fantastic question. And Diana sort of touched on it as well in her last answer. The main idea of York Region Transportation Planning is to look at all roads for all modes. So we really look at the network from a pragmatic perspective and really look at what is the best use of future improvements across that corridor, whether it being sort of active transportation improvements, providing walking and cycling alternative in the boulevard. Should we be looking at additional transit or rapid transit corridors right through to finally, okay, do we need to widen the road? And even from that perspective, we're not widening roads everywhere. So it's certainly, I think, you raised an important question about sort of salt and our water courses. I think it really comes down to what is that, how are we providing the technology and the solution in order to support our growing needs within the region of 2051. And I think through this master plan, we really did try to step back and ensure that we are right sizing our infrastructure, even more importantly, ensuring that we're looking at, I guess, even right from the start, really committing to doing further studies, really determine how best to improve. So from your perspective, that the less we can widen the roads, the less needs for salt and other mitigation resources in order to sort of compensate for our winter climate. And certainly that sort of right-sizing the road is an important part of that strategy.
Lauren, maybe I can, hopefully my audio is better. I was told my intro audio was not great. Our road operations team also has a salt management plan, and so all of that's more operational than a transportation master plan. Certainly, if anyone has interest in how we manage salt on our roads, it's something we not only salt is expensive, but it has, there are certain areas where it's very damaging to the environment. So we have a pretty explicit salt management plan. We'd be happy to share that with anyone who may be interested. So if you want to just leave any information in the Q&A, we'd be happy to follow up with more details on that element.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mark. I see another question here. Brian, maybe you're the best person to answer this one. The question was, does the current draft TMP account for the latest changes on Yonge Street and the 407 TOC, so it's transit-oriented communities, density increases?
Yeah, thanks. And good question. This is related, for those who aren't aware, to the Yonge North Subway extension and some of the recent announcements and discussions that have been around some provincial plans for population and employment in the area. Highway 407 Yonge is sort of the terminus or Richmond Center, Langstaff Gateway of the subway. Our transportation master planner is consistent with the population employment forecasts included in the work to update our official plan right now. That work right now does not include the densities that are included in this around the subway. So they haven't been approved yet, or at least at the time of doing the official plan update. So as those plans mature, we're going to have to look to see what implications it may have from a transportation perspective. But certainly, the region has been long supporting Yonge Subway North, and we're excited to see those plans move forward. So, good question, and that's the information we provide at this stage.
Great, thanks, Brian. I'm just looking for other questions here. Okay, we have a transit question. So maybe Aaron, we can get your help with this one. Are there any plans to expand BRT, which is Bus Rapid Transit, on other east-west routes in York Region aside from Highway 7?
So definitely over the next 30 years, it's a great increase in population planned for the region's centers and corridors, and we're definitely looking at the regional official plan. But looking at just further improving our bus rapid network and improving the strength in the grid lines. We're looking at Leslie Street, Jane Street, Major Mackenzie Drive. These are all identified in the TMP.
I think, Lauren, if I can add, I think it's important to note that our bus rapid transit program, much like the subway infrastructure, is shared infrastructure. The region, while we do have plans and are advocating, we can't afford to build them ourselves, since we're working with the province and in some cases the federal government to ensure we've got the funding we need. So the rapid transit plan that's shown in our network map is consistent with for the most part, with the province's plan released in the Greater Golden Horseshoe Plan, and we will be advocating with the province for the funding we need in order to build out the lanes. There's the remaining part of Yonge, there's extensions both east and west of Highway 7, and then the lanes that Aaron identified as well. So we've got a pretty ambitious plan over the next 30 years, but we can't do it alone. And so I think it's important to remember, while the region has shown us in our plan, we're one of many that have many levels of government that delivers transportation, particularly at the cost that rapid transit is. So yeah, great question, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Aaron. Okay, I have another question for Diana, and it is, how are pedestrians and their safety being prioritized in this plan? I often have close calls when crossing regional roads like Dufferin Street because of aggressive drivers. This issue is a key concern for me as a pedestrian and a commuter. I'm also concerned for seniors as pedestrians and commuters.
Thank you, Lauren, and great question and feedback. We certainly take all feedback into consideration, and safety has been a really key theme, as Carrie mentioned, that's come up through our transportation master plan update, the notion of safety for all. So certainly safety is a key priority for the region, particularly of our vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and cyclists. So I did mention just prior, we do have what's called our pedestrian and cycling planning and design guidelines. And those are really to help with the design of safe infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists to ensure that there are dedicated spaces within our regional boulevard for pedestrians and cyclists as well. Additionally, through my colleagues in the region, we do have a traffic safety program as well that has a suite of different tools that can be applied on a case-by-case basis, such as slow school zone pavement markings, speed watch boards, pedestrian crossovers as well. So varying forms of infrastructure and interventions to ensure the safety of pedestrians and cyclists.
Great, thank you very much, Diana. We have a different one here, so I might throw this one over to you, Brian. It's the question is, could we be given some more information on what wildlife crossings would or be like? How would they look like and how would they function?
Sure, thanks. And actually a timely question is, I can actually give 3 examples of current crossings that exist in the region. And on regional roads, many of our wildlife crossings are not obvious to the automobile user. So the first one actually is on, for those who live in the northern part of the central part of the region, we've been closing Stouffville Road lately to facilitate Jefferson Salamander crossings. So we've been posting those on social media, so someone may have seen that. So that's where we don't have a crossing, that you just close the road during the evening hours to facilitate that. On Bloomington, we have turtle crossings. So you can't see them from if you're on the road. If you're on the side of the road, there are sort of metal culverts or little bridges and tunnels, I guess would be a better word, under the road where turtles are able to cross. And then I think the third example is I'm blanking on the third example now. Anyways, the third one is on places like Warden and Markham. We closed a number of years ago. We actually rebuilt a number of fairly small culverts that allow rivers to meander beneath the roads. As part of the reconstruction of that road, we actually significantly widened those culverts into small bridges, which allows wildlife to cross underneath the road adjacent to the rivers. And so these are things that are invisible to the driver, but are huge benefits to our to the crossing of wildlife. So we'll continue that as part of our transportation program. I think we need to do a little better job of making sure people are aware of some of those enhancements, because again, as a driver, you just don't hit as many things, which is good. So no, we certainly plan to do it, and there's lots that are already out there, you just don't see them.
Great, thanks, Brian. Okay, I have a question for Mark. It's related to our road network improvements. And the question is, how do you decide where to recommend road improvements?
Fantastic question. I think that's kind of sort of the largest task that come out of the master plan. Really, I think it's one note that we really recommend road improvements that are planned to support the region's population employment growth to 2051, so over the next 30 years. And we use a variety of tools, including our forecasting models, to estimate this growth and really help to assist in prioritizing improvements in the following areas. One, sort of the region's most congested corridors. Secondly, areas where there's new development or major employment uses being planned. And then finally, areas that facilitate access to the freeways, our regional centers, or our regional corridors. I think it's important to mention that really the master plan identifies where York Region is really recommending future road improvements, but through this master plan, it's not identifying or not prioritizing when those improvements will be constructed. It's really through the region's annual capital planning and project prioritization process that's done on an annual basis, and subject to council endorsement that really determines what projects fall into our 10-year capital plan and sort of will be implemented and put into as part of our next series of road construction projects. And really the purpose of this is really to allow us to really meet and support where the demand and where your region is growing, really to really ensure that we're implementing our improvements at the right time and at the right place.
Laura, I would also note that our master plan, although it identifies road segments, it doesn't identify the specific improvements. Each of the projects, as they are approved in the 10-year program, will have their own environmental assessments, which will have public processes allow neighbors and community and residents to actually come out and talk about what the challenges are, what the solutions might be. So this master plan is really just identifying where we think investment should be considered. But each of these projects will have their own public process. So I just want to give people that peace of mind that the master plan does not predetermine what is being built in these areas.
Great, thanks for that answer, Mark, and the clarification, Brian, really appreciate that. I see there's another question here. It's related to cycling. So I'm wondering if Diana, you could maybe take this one. The question is there a mobile app that shows bike and hiking lanes exclusively for the region? And maybe it would help to have it as a live guide.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we currently don't have one specifically for that purpose, but a really fantastic opportunity for our team to take a look at and potentially implement in the future. We do have a couple tools that are available. We have recently updated our York Region cycling map. So we have a new 2021-2022 cycling map that's been updated in consultation with our local municipalities. So it's got up-to-date cycling routes there, and it would be a really fantastic resource for anyone looking to plan their route, as it showcases the different types of cycling facilities within the region. So you can reference that within the cycling map. If folks are interested on the call on the public information session tonight, we can certainly provide printed copies of that to help plan your route out. And if anyone's interested, transportation@york.ca would be the best place to contact. And my team would be happy to provide a printed copy of our cycling map.
Great. Thanks so much, Diana. I see there is a question here on how does the TMP address a fiscally responsible approach when developing the transportation network maps and deciding the focus areas? So maybe, Brian, I'll turn that one over to you since it's a little bit more general.
Yeah, no, this has been a key theme of this master plan. Traditionally, master plans are sort of visionary documents that often don't consider the cost implications of improvements. And so one of the key principles of this master plan, we want to make sure that the improvements we recommend are fiscally responsible, but that would mean we've actually looked at what our current budget is for the next 10 years and use that as a guide to how much we can afford to build over the next 30 years. And certainly when you look at travel demand and requests for improvements, we have more improvements than we have dollars for. So that's where our prioritization process is so key in helping us identify where improvements should go and how to get the best value for money for those improvements, meaning we want to move the maximum of people, not just necessarily cars. And so that's why you see things in areas where there's rapid transit or HOV lanes or close to new communities with new residents who need not only lanes if they choose to drive or take a bus, but also have the sidewalks and separate second facilities and multi-use paths that people need. Because we recognize that regional roads aren't just for commuters; they're more and more for communities. And it's certainly something I think we've seen through the pandemic is people move into neighborhoods and they want to walk their dog and you can't do that effectively in the ditch on the side of a rural road. So this master plan recognizes and assumes we have similar budgets to what we have over this current 10 years. So I think we've got a realistic envelope for what is deliverable over the next 30.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. I have a question here for Erin as it relates to transit. The question is, most recently, the cost of fares on YRT has been going up. What is the plan to lower the cost and make the buses more accessible to everyone?
So York Region Council has approved a 2022 York Region fare freeze. And so for the past several years, we have had a fare freeze. So we'll continue with the current fares for this year. In addition, the York Region offers the Transit Assistance Program for residents who may have lower income or require additional support to pay for the cost of transit. The program is available for eligible residents between the ages of 18 and 64 years old, and travelers receive a half-price single transit fare, which is approximately at this time $1.94, and that includes the 2-hour transfer window. Once 40 trips have been reached in a calendar month, any additional trips in that calendar month are then free. And this is a program that we've had for the last several years. Additional information can be found on this program at yrt.ca/TAP. We're also continuing to increase our mobility on request service in more urban and rural areas, really connecting people to main transit corridors and select locations that have been identified by the community as locations that people want to connect to. So we're looking at, assisting with the cost of transit, connecting people to main corridors, and increasing service with our on request in more rural areas. And in addition to that, for accessibility, meeting those AODA standards and guidelines, our service is very accessible, meeting and or exceeding accessibility guidelines.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. I guess just really to add on to that, one of the areas that we will be focusing on that we've identified through our transportation master plan as a transportation priority and area for further study is a focus area on transportation equity. So it's really just making sure that, transportation, the services and the networks that we are implementing are available and accessible to all travelers, all users, regardless of, income, gender, race, culture. So really just that's an area that's rather new for us in terms of delving deep dive into programs, et cetera. So that's something that we have just started to explore, and we'll be continuing that work on further through the TMP. I do see another question here, I think for Diana, about it's related to e-scooters. And the question is, how is the TMP considering improvement needs to existing roads and active transportation facilities, such as trails and bike lanes, to support micromobility like e-scooters?
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren. Certainly micromobility, we really have seen as a growing trend throughout York Region. I know many of you have likely seen individuals with their own e-scooters or e-bikes traveling across the region. It definitely continues to be a growing trend that we are monitoring, both the use of e-bikes, e-scooters, and other forms of electric powered devices. We certainly recognize that micromobility has the ability to provide first and last kilometer solutions. And so we're certainly looking to explore this topic further as part of our transportation master plan update, as a specific focus area is included as part of a focus area. I do want to mention currently within York Region, we have permitted the use of e-scooters in select regionally designated bike lanes. So that could include bike lanes such as Dufferin Street, on-street bike lanes on Dufferin Street, north of Steeles, or within the town of Newmarket on Yonge Street, north of Mulock Drive. So, there have been certain areas across the region where e-scooters have been permitted, and we're continuing to monitor the use of these devices, and also, taking a closer look at their integration on our local network as well, working closely with our partners at our local municipalities.
Thanks, Diana. Appreciate that. I have another one. I think maybe Brian, you could answer it about the challenges of maintaining the bike lanes. It reads, secondly, how does the region maintain the current bike lanes, such as on St. John's Side Road, which has a mogul surface, making it challenging to use?
Thanks, Lauren. So skiers would enjoy moguls, but I'm sure that's not ideal for a cycling route. And this is actually one of the challenges we have in the region as a two-tier government system. Right now, I happen to live near this cycling facility. The multi-use path on St. John's is actually owned and operated by the town of Aurora. And it's a bit of a challenge as we figure out who maintains what. And so what we have is a focus area in the master plan to really clarify that cycling lanes should be built off street, as Diana mentioned earlier in her presentation, and really clarifying who the ownership and maintenance of those facilities should be. Because if we're going to build them, they need to be maintained and constructed in a way that makes them useful. So we do have a plan, and there are some cost implications both regionally and locally. So this is an area we want to bring back separately to our council. And that's sort of the idea of our focus areas, that these are policy recommendations that can't just be buried in a large master plan, because they have their significant costs and other implications that need to be discussed. So we'll be bringing back some recommendations on how off-street cycling facilities are maintained, and those will be coming to our council the next, probably in 2023. So yeah, great question, and certainly something we're aware of and want to work on to do better.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, I see another one here related to the road network. So Mark, I'm going to throw this one over to you. The question is the region going to be an advocate for the interchanges along Highway 400 north of Teston Road in order to support the growth in that area?
The transportation aspect actually looks at two potential interchanges north of Teston Road on Highway 400. One at Kinvon Road and another one Pendley Road. Really, the determination of which one of those two locations will be sort of impacted by the future approved location of the GTA West corridor. And from that point, we'll be working with the province advocating to connect one or the other of those two crossings. So as Brian mentioned, on something like an interchange on the highway is in partnership with the Ministry of Transportation, and we'll be certainly working with them to really help identify, protect, and ultimately implement
Thanks, Mark. I see a question on autonomous vehicles. So Brian, I'm going to maybe ask this one of you. The question is, as autonomous vehicles will be a reality in the near future, what do we have in the plan to be adaptive to this fundamental change in our transportation model, since we are planning out to 2051?
Yeah, great question. And it's certainly been a challenge in this master plan. And we built in the theme of flexibility. And certainly one of the biggest impacts as we started this master plan was the pandemic. And I think we only know that we don't know the future, and that all the best laid plans go out the window when things change. And so certainly autonomous vehicles are coming. We know that it will not be the region who is going to drive autonomous vehicles, but we need to be prepared for them. So in the master plan, we talk about flexibility and the ability to ensure we're investing in roads that aren't going to change, or their use will change. We're changing technologies. I think that focusing road improvements in areas where we know we have communities being built, where people are going to be using the roads not only for driving, as I said, for walking the dog, for cycling. And so we've had to build this flexibility into our master plan. There's a section talking about technology and impacts of technology. And certainly I could talk at length. We've made some significant strides in our traffic signal technology in the region, and those signals will be able to communicate when ready with vehicles when that two-way communication is ready to happen. So it's certainly on our minds, and we've actually done some in the technical analysis behind the recommendations. We did do some model runs where we looked at impacts of autonomous vehicles and what that could do to our road system. And certainly from a planning group like ours, we talk about the policy implications of, is it going to increase people living further away from where they work because now they can in an urban sprawl, or will people move away from owning cars like I no longer own DVDs because I have Netflix? Will people move to a shared use model? And so those are really interesting market trends we'll have to monitor. But so we are flexible and want to make sure that this master plan, we don't know the future, but we're ready to adapt when times do change. And electric vehicles are in that same mix in terms of they really change how people use autos. So really good question on our minds, and we just know that we don't know the final answer, so we need to be ready to adjust. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. I think we have time for one more. I can't believe how quickly the time is flying by. I'm going to pass this last question over to Diana as it relates to cycling and our trails network map. The question is, Diana, does the cycling network map show all on-road facilities, and the trail network show all off-road, perhaps a paved or gravel trail beside the roadway? So really the question is what is the difference between the cycling network and the trail network? You could provide a little clarification there for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. Great question. As part of our transportation master plan update, many of you have likely seen the network maps that have been created as part of the transportation master plan. So for cycling specifically, there have been two maps that have been created really that are intended to be used together, but certainly understand this question, a little bit of the confusion around it. The cycling network map is really intended to showcase existing facilities that are within our regional right-of-way or proposed. So when we say our regional right-of-way, it's typically kind of right adjacent to the street within our boulevard that encompasses sidewalks, cycling facilities, street trees, etc. So that's really intended to showcase the cycling network within our regional right-of-way that is predominantly used by more commuter-based cyclists, so ones that are traveling from a direct route from point A to B that are looking for a direct route along the street. Whereas our regional trail network is really intended to showcase a larger picture of the numerous trails that we have within the region. And so these are typically, trails that are embedded in more forested areas and tend to meander a bit more. So that's a little bit of the difference between the two. And as I mentioned, they're really intended to be used together because we recognize that, throughout the region, we certainly see both recreational and commuter cyclists using both types of infrastructure for different purposes. So, for example, there could be a cycling facility within a regional right-of-way that is used for commuters, but it could also comprise part of our lake-to-lake walking route and cycling trail. So that's just a bit of an example of how cycling facilities can be included on both of these maps and how they're really intended to be used together to showcase a picture of cycling within the region.
Super. Thank you, Diana. Well, I am keeping an eye on the clock and have help behind the scenes as well with my colleagues. So thank you. I do see we are at 8:26. We unfortunately do have to wrap up the Q&A. There are lots of great questions. So we'll just move into our next slide. I do want to emphasize that the questions that we're receiving are fantastic, by the way, and they're all important to us. And really just a reminder that whatever we haven't had an opportunity to address tonight, we will be reviewing and providing answers on through our webpage at york.ca/TMP. So those answers will go up in the next few days. As well, the draft TMP, including all the information that you've seen here this evening, and as well as our transportation networks and the focus area recommendations will also be available on our TMP webpage. If you do have any further comments and would like to provide additional input, we really encourage you to please visit our webpage where you can access the interactive mapping tool. So it's what you was shown in that video of this evening, or you're more than welcome to email us at transportation@york.ca. We will be receiving comments until April 29th. All feedback that we receive will be reviewed and considered for the update to the 2022 Transportation Master Plan. And as a next step, we are aiming to bring the TMP to our council for approval in June this year. Following council approval, we will be issuing a notice of study completion for the TMP, and that will be followed by the mandatory 30-day public review period. And then as we move forward after the TMP is approved, regional staff will be monitoring progress on the TMP initiatives and providing regular progress updates. And we're also planning to create a video version of the TMP in the coming months, so please do stay tuned to our TMP webpage for that. So at this point, I'm now going to turn things back over to Caroline to wrap up this evening's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. To summarize, in all phases, we collected feedback from the public, community stakeholders, and partners. This feedback helped us develop the focus areas, which relates back to what we heard was important and needed for the future of York Region's transportation network with respect to cycling, walking, taking transit, and driving. The draft Transportation Master Plan includes the proposed network maps and focus areas, and this will be shared on york.ca/TMP within the next few days. Thank you for your feedback during tonight's Public Information Center. As a reminder, you can provide feedback until Friday, April 29th. Thank you for your time and for contributing your ideas to the future of transportation in York Region. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.